a little complicated in depth. Hopefully we will avoid that, but it is finance and it is the budget, which, as we know, if certainly if Councillor Head's way, we'll be speaking a lot longer on it than we do normally. So we'll move on to apologies for absence. I've had apologies from Councillor Head, from Councillor Cockshaw and from Councillor Sue Little. Does everybody? That's fine. Move to item 2, which is page 5 to 16, to approve the minutes. That's a correct record of Cabinet held on the 14th of December. Is that all agree with everybody? Okay, just take time to. Moving on to items of urgent business, I've not received any urgent items of business, so we'll move forward to item 4, which is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest on the items that are on tonight? None at all. We'll now move on to statements by me. I promised that there would always be a clean cut Philip update. Obviously, over the winter, not so much doing it in the cut it, but still the work goes on. Signs are being cleaned across the borough for road signs to make them more visible. As we're all aware, we started a pilot to issue fixed penalty notices for littering across the borough. To date, 418 have been issued. It is a significant number, but I think the message is finally getting out there. They are predominantly, obviously, tickets that have been issued for littering, but there have also been ones for dog fouling and not clearing it up. This seems to be a bit on the increase in parks and public areas. So I will be talking to officers and, of course, Councillor Tolson to see whether we can put a bit of resource into that to try and reduce that and educate residents through the process of the fixed penalty notice. It's just not acceptable. These are our parks, our gardens and our streets. Your dogs should not be leaving their mess there, and you should be leaving it for them. 99% of our dog walkers and owners, certainly the ones that I meet, are very, very good at clearing up their dog mess. And I know some of them, well, one of the things that came back from Clean Cut at Phillip was it's great that the grass was being cut because they're not actually spending time searching for their dog waste. So yeah, these things do have an impact, but it just still goes on. It's those irresponsible dog owners that are not picking up after their dogs that are causing the problem. Unfortunately, littering isn't the only problem when it comes to rubbish, as we all know. Fly tips across the borough just seems to be getting worse and worse. We're aware of it, we are working with it. It's not just a problem for Thurrock, and I don't like to sort of say, well, it's not just us, it's everybody. So we are working closely with Essex Police, doing patrols with them on certain nights to see if we can find hotspots. I'm obviously not going to go into much detail on that because, quite frankly, we want to catch them. One of the things I've recently said is that we have to be lucky once. They're going to have to be lucky for the rest of their fly tipping lives. And I will make sure that when we do catch them, that they do feel the full brunt of the law. One fly tip being caught may not be responsible for just one fly tip. And we need to make sure that when prosecuting, that is made very clear to the relevant court. To give this some sort of perspective, October and November we've cleared up 318 tonnes of fly tipping. That's the equivalent of 212 full focuses, and that cost the taxpayer about £50,000 to remove. So this isn't a victimless crime. The victims here are every single taxpayer in this borough. Everyone that pays council tax is paying for this, and that's just grossly unfair. Moving away from Clean Cut Phillip, the election consultation is now open and will be running until 31st of March. Any residents wishing to take part should go to our website. There are also downloadable forms to return. It is quite important that people have their say. We've been doing third elections for longer than I've been a councillor. Is it time to change? Is it time to go for a different model, or is it time to remain the same? Whilst it's good for us to discuss this at full council, etc., it's actually down to the residents to make that decision. So I really do look forward to a much higher consultation response than we perhaps normally get. We've issued fines totaling £14,000 to letting agents for not complying with legal requirements to say how much they are charging and how they're looking after tenants' deposits. It is a lucrative business in Thurrock. There are an awful lot of properties up for rent, and we need to make sure that those that are renting them out are complying with the regulations. Obviously that will change as we go through the new legislation coming forward, but at the moment, they need to be on top of it, and putting excuses forward like we think it's too much of a fine because we've made a mistake just doesn't cut it with the relevant authority. So I've asked that all letting agents that operate in Thurrock really do get their books in line. There's a new temporary parking area for HGVs in Stamford. This is part of an attempt to reduce illegal parking in residential areas. I'm sure all the councillors here can name at least one road in their area that gets affected by this, more so the homesteads and those in the east of the borough. Hopefully this will start to help with that. The 14 bus service, which Councillor Hooley did so well in getting back into operation, is now increasing its service and will effectively run all week. So it's nearly a double of the service, which is absolutely fantastic. Just goes to show that when residents do use these facilities, it does become financially viable for people to expand their business. As of a couple of hours ago, I still believe this is the same. Young Emily Summers is still missing. 13-year-old young lady has been missing from Grays. A photo has been shared on social media. It's on the council's website. I believe we've also got a large picture in front of the billboard, in front of the building. If you haven't already shared through social media, if you could, obviously, safety that they're going 13-year-old is paramount, and we really should be doing all we can and wish for a safe return for her. I'm sure we're all disappointed to hear about the East Tilbury Library. That kind of vandalism is just despicable. It really is. There really are not enough words to describe what happens there. I've just been informed that the structural engineer still hasn't completed their survey of the area, but we are hoping that once that's done we can organise a good clean-up. I know Councillor McPherson was on site on the day, residents coming up and saying this is not just about the books, this is not just about the heritage stuff that's there, this is about the other clubs that happen at the libraries. And I think when we think of libraries, I think we need to stop thinking about a place where you pick up and drop off books. And libraries are proper community centres, and they supply a lot more services than just lending and returning of books. And obviously with East Tilbury being fairly isolated in its location, obviously the quicker that we can get a resolution for this, the better. Tonight we've got, obviously with Councillor Sue Little not being here, I'm sure there will still be some emphasis on the domiciliary care project that we're moving forward with. Councillor Howard will be taking that item. It's a great idea, it's a different way of doing things, and this is what we'll discuss as we get onto the budget. It's not all about cuts, it's about doing it different, providing more for less. For transforming homes from housing, two resident information sessions were held this week. It's all feeds into the housing review, which, as we know, is ongoing. It will take a couple of months until one gets to the point of saying, this is happening, this is changing, and how the specific areas are changing. But we are locating those little problems, from communication issues all the way to bigger problems of services not being provided as and when they should do. But we are getting there, I can assure you. And finally, Holocaust Memorial Day is Friday the 27th of January. It's 11 o'clock at Highview Gardens at the top of Grays. This year's theme is How Can Life Go On? Each year there was a different theme relating to not just the Holocaust of World War II, but all Holocausts that have happened throughout the ages and unfortunately still continue to happen. So I would urge people that can do to attend. It is a moving day. Yes, it can be cold, but there invariably is a hand-hold concession, which does warm me up a little bit, as Councillor Snell found out last year. So we'll now move on to briefings on policy, budget and other issues. Obviously with the budget forming most of tonight's cabinet agenda, I won't be talking anything on that other than when we get to those particular points. Petitions submitted by members of the public. Kelly, we don't have any, do we?
So
And there are no questions from non-executive members. And then matters referred to Cabinet for consideration overview by overview and scrutiny committee. There is that within the two financial papers where it's come back from overview and scrutiny, and indeed we'll be referring some parts back to them from this evening. So I'll then move on to item 10, which can be found on page 17 to 34, which is the domiciliary care new service model, and I shall pass over to Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Leader. Presenting this on Councillor Little's behalf this evening, I suppose it's my first big cabinet test of how much I listen to Councillor Little and actually take in what she says to me. First of all, Leader, you're right, it's not all about cuts. Anyone who makes an objective assessment of the figures can clearly see that you can't continue on the same trajectory forever without finding new ways of doing things. No money in the world would ever allow that. So why are we proposing this new model? First of all, the population isn't just getting larger, isn't just getting older, it's becoming more complex. Now, we've done a good job in recent years of keeping people out of hospital and getting people home from hospital quicker. That is obviously good because our hospitals obviously face great burdens. That does come, however, with its own challenges. The more people we are getting out of the hospitals and other institutions, the more they require their own support in their own home. That puts pressure on the domiciliary care market. Obviously, our proximity to London and the fact that we are a small unitary authority means that in recent years, the per hour price of domiciliary care, we have struggled to keep pace with. We're currently set at about £13 an hour. However, it's not just about money, it is about innovation, and I think what Councillor Little has proposed really does meet that. So there are three specific actions coming out of this paper. First of all, we're proposing a geographical lot system. So the borough will be carved up and providers will be asked to bid on tenders based on a much smaller geographic locality. That will do a few things. First of all, it will prevent the practice of a domiciliary care provider having to decide whether or not it's viable to service one patient in Aveley and then travel all the way to Fobbing, because obviously you are not paid for the time which you are travelling. It will provide an element of healthy competition. No one will be able to win more than two lots, so there will be an internal market within the borough. And very importantly, it also means the borough will not accidentally be held to ransom. So we won't get in a situation where we have one very large provider of domiciliary care. So if they fold or if they get into difficulty, it will take the entire borough network down with them. It will build in that capacity. Secondly, we're supporting micro enterprises. The team's doing an amazing job. What Roger and the social care team led by Les Billing were doing, schemes like Shared Lives, finding micro businesses that we can nurture. So looking past just the massive providers and looking at how we can nurture small entrepreneurs to help drive the market from that grassroots up. Shared Lives is a good example where we're finding people with complex needs, Down syndrome for example, staying in a relationship akin to foster care for much longer. And finally, we are looking more to community-based solutions. Now, it's not the 1960s. Simply putting somebody in a care home or just having traditional care packages is not always the right way to go. And in my experience, and I know it's in Councillor Little's, it's rarely what people actually want. People want to be able to stay in their own home. People want flexibility. They want to be in their own community. So looking to things like low wear coordination often can offer a better quality of life, more in keeping with what people are used to. And I think that's a great benefit. And obviously there are still going to be the bespoke, very expensive, very technical care packages for those who specifically require it. That will still have to be a very substantial element of the budget. But this is a package of measures that's hoping to innovate us past just the traditional ways of working. So specifically what Cabinet is asked to do this evening is to put this in place. Also agree an extension of existing arrangements so we can get the tenders in place, get the schemes embedded, and the extension of the current system will give us the lead-in time to do that. And finally, Leader, this report should be seen in conjunction with other things the authority is doing. Overview and scrutiny, and then later Cabinet will soon see a refresh of schemes like assisted technology, the sorts of pendant alarms, emergency alarms that allow older people to stay in their own homes for longer and remain independent. We're looking at a massive upgrade of that service and trying to expand it, make sure more people have access to this technology to try and keep them independent. So this report should be seen in conjunction with a whole cocktail of measures designed to make the care closer to people, more community-based to people, and give them the sort of care in the community that ultimately I think we would all like to see. So with that, leader, I'm happy to open to any questions. Obviously, to the best of my ability, I'm not the cabinet member for social care.
I'm sure if you falter that, Roger will be able to jump in. Any questions for Councillor Howard? No? And anyone want to make statements on this? I mean, this is, Councillor Howard quite clearly said, this is really innovative, this is different. Putting this in, putting this model in where small Thurrock businesses or smaller businesses in Thurrock will be nurtured is doing it for Thurrock, not just for Thurrock residents, but it's for Thurrock residents, by Thurrock residents and businesses. It's absolutely a great idea. I was, as we all do, we watch the news and we see people say, you know, well, I'm a carer and this is the problem, I care for 4 people in an hour, but within that time I've got to spend 15 minutes driving from one to the next to the next. Well, just simply clustering them together changes that. And this paper really just addresses what does seem to be a simple solution to a complex question. So, very well done to Sue. This is just a shame she's not here, because I'm sure she would speak for a lot longer on this. But also well done to officers for obviously working with Sue to come forward with these all these changes. So on that, we have recommendations 1.1 to 1.3 as laid out on page 17 and 18. I'm not going to read them out, but I'll be in agreement with all 3. We'll now move on to item 11, which is the local council tax scheme. As that can be found on page 35 of the agenda. With Councillor Head not being here this evening, I will keep it as short and sweet as possible. I'm fairly sure, and I know that everybody here has read this, and I'm sure that other members from Overview and Scrutiny and indeed non-exec members have read the report as well. The local council tax scheme replaced the old council tax benefit scheme in March 2013. It's now down to each local authority to set their own criteria for applications by the 31st of January each financial year. This year we've made changes to the current scheme more in line with housing benefit or universal credit rules, which will lead to a reduced amount of local council tax scheme money being paid out. We must remember that this scheme is funded from the council tax paid across the borough from everybody, and officers have estimated there would be about £100,000 extra coming into the council if all these are agreed. This has been to consultation with residents, and details of the responses are there. It's just very disappointing that there was only less than 40 people responded. It really is a shame. You know, the more people that have their say on this, the much easier it is for us to gauge what residents actually need and what they really want. There are 6 different recommendations here. Some of them, for instance, I'll just use proposed change 4 and change 6 had no financial impact on residents. This is just basically bringing policies in line with other forms of benefit that's currently in existence. And as I said, by the time we start stripping out bits for the Essex County Fire Service, the Essex Police, and those that will actually collect, we are looking for somewhere in the region of about £100,000 extra coming in. Now, I've spoken to Sean with this before Christmas, and it seems to me this is money that we've not actually put into the base budget as yet, so it doesn't appear as part of the next item, because it needs to be agreed full council at the end of the month. Now, I see this as a prime example of money that's coming in that we can use for things that we've not budgeted for. And I'm going to suggest that we add a separate recommendation as 1.7, which will be that we use this money, and I'll dictate a little bit later before we get there, that we use £50,000 of this money from, if these schemes are agreed, to help fund the CAB, the Thurrock Citizens Advice Bureau. You know, their money was cut several years ago. We've been speaking to them directly. They've come forward with some business cases that we're looking at, and obviously we'll get back in contact with them. But I think we should be using half of this money raised to help those people that need the help across the borough. And you know, we're not the ones to provide that. That's the CAB. I'm sure we all know my personal view on the way that we present budgets now, where we don't say exactly what we're supplying. That's down to us at Cabinet to say how we spend the cash envelopes for each section, for each division. But I'm sorry, on this one, I really do feel that we need to ring fence this money just to help the CAB move forward and provide those services that our residents do need. So before I actually just state exactly what I put here as an extra recommendation, have you got any questions or statements on the scheme changes? No? Right?
Just regarding your suggestion about the money for CAB, is that permanent money for CAB year on year, or is that a one-off payment?
We are looking at the business cases that have been put forward. Obviously, as with every other service that we, outside service that we help fund, there would be a time limit on those funds. We can't just say that it'd be in perpetual. It'd be nice to be able to say that would be a permanent thing, but the reality is that, you know, if we continue to throw money at service, would they still need it in, say, 3 years or 5 years' time? So it would form part of the business plan that's coming forward, and they are, in good fairness to them, they are in regular contact with us and have put a whole raft of proposals forward, which we're looking at. Some of them are really good ideas. So this is not just, as we've done in the past, it's fund. This is actually stuff packed up, but we have a service level agreement with them and everything. So the extra recommendation will be, depending on the approval of business case provided, the £50,000 raised from the above changes, that's from 1.1 to 1.6, of the local council tax scheme be used to fund Thurrock Citizens Advice Bureau. So obviously, depending on what we agree with their business plan and their business case put forward. So are we in agreement with all of those that are put forward? Agreed? Just to remind everybody, this is not the final decision on this. This does go to full council at the end of the month. As I said, it has to be agreed there by the 31st of January. So it will be over to all members to discuss this at the full council at the end of the month. Moving on to the draft general budget, and that's found on page 51 to 64. Again, this will be councillor heads, but I'll be able to say keep it short and sweet when it comes to the budget. I'll be doing my very, very best for it. Firstly, obviously, as usual, well done to Sean and everyone involved in ensuring that we can set a balanced budget despite having to work with £10 million less than previous year. And of course, this cabinet's, you know, rightly increasing a budget for clean and cut fillet by £1 million. That's an extra pressure that obviously wasn't there at the beginning of the year. That Sean and everybody else have risen to the challenge to get to make sure we can come in on budget. But the thanks has got to go down all the way through the service. This is not just the heads of service and directors saying we're going to make ends meet. This is being driven by 5 boards? Yeah, 7 boards, sorry. 7 boards that meet regularly to look at not just how we can trim a little bit off here and a little bit off there, but how we can do things differently. And it is down to them that we are with this proposed budget today. In the past, members have sat here and attacked the government for reducing the amount of taxpayers' money allocated to the general fund. But I'm not going to do that because the general fund is only part of the money we receive from government. As I said earlier, we've got the best part of £300,000 coming to help us with potholes in one way, shape or form. That's a significant amount of money that doesn't sit in the general fund, so we can't ignore those extra bits that come in from government as we bid, and we are doing very successful with our bidding, which is good to see. But like every other business, every other individual and every other council, we've got to live within our means. So it's time spent bemoaning on how we're going to reduce service or reduce this or reduce that. It's time wasted. It could be much better spent, as the 7 boards have, is actually looking for ideas to move forward and get the money in. I understand from Sean that the amount of grant that we received was the amount that we expected. There was no change there. But there was obviously the late announcement at the back of last year about the adult social care precepts. Whereas we were allowed to increase it by 2% each year, we've been given the opportunity to be able to increase it by a total of 6% and no more than 3% in any one year. So that means either 3, 3 and 0, 3, 2, 1, or remaining as 2, 2 and 2. Now, each one of them have got their own individual pitfalls and benefits. 2, 2 and 2 gives you an extra £19,000 in the bank at the end of 3 years. That 3, 3, or 3, 2, 1 would then help officers be able to provide services that we've seen earlier with the domiciliary care, to actually shape the service to be able to squeeze out the maximum amount of efficiency from it, therefore not having to increase the costs to the taxpayer as we go through the years. So that's going to be passed back down to overview and scrutiny to look at and to come forward with their suggestions before. Obviously, this goes back to full council in February. When we look at the adult social care problems, we've got to remember, of course, that not all of them are issues that the council has direct control over. So if we look at page 54, for instance, the national living wage increase is 5%, whereas officers at the council, for instance, have only had a 1% increase, or some of them have only had a 1% increase for the past couple of years. It's the right thing to do. We all agree the living wage as a standard. The living wage is not set by government, it's set by an outside body, and they're saying this is how much people need for a living wage. So that money has got to be picked up. It doesn't come from anywhere else other than, I'm afraid, from the taxpayer. So to make sure we can meet that, we're going to have to come up with ideas and suggestions to move it forward. And that's the one thing that we said when we were in opposition. We are not going to do a death by 1,000 cuts when it comes to budgets. There will not be the top slicing. We will look for alternatives, and well done every officer that's been involved in this. We've got a whole raft of changes there at the appendices, which are now a mixture of income generation opportunities, such as these Wi-Fi, small cell, rooftop concessions for mobile phones, mobile data, etc. Growth in income by providing services such as trade waste. We already provide trade waste, but a very limited amount. That's now expanding out. We're expanding that out, obviously to help those businesses that didn't have wage trade licence that they're supposed to. And of course becoming a lot more efficient in the way and the location we provide services. For instance, the youth offending team is now coming back to the council offices. That will help reduce the outgoings. We are trying to get more for less in our contract negotiations. So whereas before, in years gone by, we would see £10,000 cut from this, £87,000 cut from the CAB, we're not seeing that this time around, and this is the way forward. I think this is to be congratulated. To change a methodology within 1 year of the way that you present a budget is fairly rare. So, as I say, well done to all those involved. Now, I don't intend to go through all the savings and all the proposals. There are some really good ones in there, so if anyone's got any particular ones that they want to highlight in their area, now's your time. Councillor Howard.
Thanks, Leader. It's a shame Councillor Head isn't here, because both Councillor Head as Cabinet Finance and Mr Clark both deserve a great deal of praise. This Conservative administration will deliver a balanced budget by the time we take it to full council. And I remember when we were in opposition, just sat there with a level of amusement at the last Labour administration. Every meeting that would start with that ridiculous graph and do, constantly moaning that they wished to have more money. Never actually clarifying where that money would come from, like all good socialists, just demanding more money. This administration, in the last 7 months, just in my area in education, we've committed £7 million to school capital plans. Children's centre reform, which we have now passed, is going to outreach to even more vulnerable families while saving a great deal of money. And clean it, cut it, fill it. just look at recommendation 1. For an investment of £1 million, we are going to be able to maintain the tremendous strides that Clinic Cabinet Jan has made to improving how this borough looks. This is significant work that you can get on with if you look past just moaning about the situation you're in. No administration will ever have enough money to do everything they want. You can always come up with reasons to have more money. But this administration will be Clinic Cabinet Jan with Councillor Liston and Councillor Tolson, the money that myself and Rory put into school capital plans. If you've got the will, you can find a way. And I think that's what this Conservative administration has done, and it will produce a balanced budget when we get to the Chamber in February. And that's really something the entire administration, from the leader downwards, should be very proud of.
Thank you. And actually there was one group of people that I completely forgot to mention, which I really feel quite bad about. Is actually we operate in a council spending review, which we do pretty much every month. And thank you very much for Councillor Snell and Councillor Jones, and obviously Councillor Jones hasn't been able to attend, Councillor Duffin for attending, and being actually part of the process. We could sit here and go, okay, this is what we're going to do, and be down to everybody else, but we haven't. We've been quite open with this, and I thank the UKIP leader and his group for attending every single one and being there and actually saying yes and no. Would we like to have set a council tax budget increase of 0? Yes, we would have done. Would that have impacted on services? Yeah, quite possibly. Is it the best thing to do? We had long discussions about it with the council spending review, and it was agreed that actually the way forward is to increase by the 1.98% of the council tax. Obviously, the adult social care precept's a bit of a curveball at the last minute. That's why it's going back to overview scrutiny. But as I say, this has not just been myself and Shane, or myself, Shane officers, or cabinet officers. It's also involved members of the opposition, which is fantastic, and long may that continue, irrespective of who's in charge. Anybody else got anything to raise on these? Okay, I will read these because I think this is quite important when it comes to the budget. And again, I need to make clear this is not the decision-making body for the second budget. That's full council, and that will be at the end of February. Between now and the end of February, as we said earlier, with the local council tax scheme, if that's agreed in January, that would put an extra £100,000 into the budget, £50,000 of that to go to the Thurrock Citizens Advice Bureau once we've agreed the business plan for them, which gives us a little bit of option. And the one thing that's been really good is the fact that we started this process, the formal part of this process tonight, doesn't mean the bit behind the formal part has stopped. Officers are still working with the portfolio holders, and we will still go to the council spending review meetings with more proposals to try and make it more efficient as a council. We can't just sit down and go, well, we've started now, we'll wait for 2 months. We can't afford to wait for 2 months. And the thing is, everyone's buying into it still. So recommendations as on page 52. Cabinet agreed a further £1 million investment to include Clinic Cabinet Jan into the base budget. All agreed? Cabinet agreed with 1.98 increase in council tax to support the general fund budget. Very reluctantly. The corporate overview and scrutiny be asked to comment on the adult social care precept options as set out in 3.6 of this report. And the Cabinet agreed to the proposal set out to support to achieve the balanced budget. Agreed. Excellent, thank you very much. And to end the evening on a nice positive note, we move to page 65, item 13, which is the East Tilbury Primary Care Intervention Plan. That can be found on page 65. Councillor Howard will take this forward, but before he does, I would remind everybody on Cabinet there are pink papers attached to this. Everybody who knows me knows I detest pink papers. I think as much as should be out in the public domain as possible, but it's quite clear and obvious why the information that's kept on the exempt item is there, and I would ask members not to stray into areas of finance when it comes to this. I think this is one of these items where finance is at the back burner. This is all about service provision. So to you, Councillor Howard.
Well, this report is the administration's attempt to intervene in order to prevent a primary care crisis. Members will be aware of the crisis that we are working hard to avert. The Eastern Medical Centre was owned by a local GP. When he was declared a bankrupt, he set a series of events into motion. Firstly, the closure and the sale of the centre as a part of insolvency procedures would have meant that 2,500 patients would have been out without their normal GP. This means that many of them would have had to travel much more significant distances to reach care. The secondary impact is the fact that Thurrock already has a massively under-doctored population. Consider how an extremely stretched primary care network, as it is, would have responded to having a further injection of several thousand patients already onto overburdened list. It would not have been a good situation. The calamity was compounded when NHS England took the decision to respond to this by dispersing the list. This means essentially they take the decision to advise patients to begin the process of moving to a new surgery. This was done with very little time for patients to think or for us to put anything else in place. This would have simply expedited the crisis that I'm referring to. At the time, I instructed officers to look into taking the building ourselves to prevent the need for dispersal. In addition to this, NHS England decided to pause the dispersal following robust representations from myself, the CCG, the Patient Participation Group, Health Watch and our local MP Stephen Metcalfe. Quietly and diligently, my team have been working with NHS England and with other partners, and I'm delighted this evening to present the proposal. Firstly, I can confirm that the Council will seek to use our capital powers to take the building and maintain it as a medical centre. Conversations with the receiver thus far have been positive. In addition, this will complete a deal that we have brokered with NHS England, who have agreed to our request to continue to tender a medical facility from this building. This will hopefully maintain the coverage for each and every patient. These actions can avert this dispersal crisis that could overburden other GP facilities and save the medical centre for people of East Tilbury. However, this intervention does come with a health warning. This is still subject to final terms with the receiver. We can only take this action if the terms that we obtain from the receiver are reasonable. This administration cannot and will not set a precedent of intervention where we invest in assets above reasonable market value. Such terms are obviously subject to great sensitivity, which is why Cabinet colleagues will find an exempt report attached, providing further details. I urge any concerned party not to speculate on social media about these possible terms and to contact the Council. Leader, this is the light at the end of the tunnel, but it's not the end of the tunnel itself. I hope to be able to update members when we convene for full council at the end of the month. I'm happy to take questions.
No, thank you. Any questions for Councillor Howard on this? No? Councillor McPherson.
Just to say thank you to James and his officers. I don't think you've actually done anything quietly and diligently. I think you've actually gone in and you've fought for the residents to still be very hard. And I think, let's hope that I know we're halfway down the tunnel, but let's hope we get to the end of the tunnel and actually give attention to James and his officers. Thank you.
Anybody else? This is one of those right things to do. It's an unforeseen occurrence. It's one of those things that would never be normally predicted, very high risk, and when it actually happened, it had a massive impact on the local community. It's good to see so many people fighting to keep this open. Patient participation groups, I would urge more people to become part of a patient participation group. As the chair of a patient participation group, there is nothing worse than turning up to the meeting when you have staff and you have 5 or 6 of your patients at the surgery there when you've got a surgery roll of about 7,500. This is perfect. When I was first contacted by Councillor Howden to say this was happening, there was no question in my mind that the course of action we were doing was the right course of action. Obviously, as I said, whilst this has to be public to make clear what we're doing, please do not speculate on social media. We've had this before where we've had to go to receivers in relation to contracts and suddenly the price will be hiked up. or the terms we've taken are just uncontrollable for us, and then that would mean the loss of a very useful provision in East Tilbury. Cannot underestimate the lack of doctors and GPs within Tilbury and East Tilbury. It is so significant, and this really does go the full way to making sure we've got a base for them to operate out of. So well done there, James, and indeed to officers. Have you something else to add?
Sorry, the only thing I forgot to add was just responding to one issue that appeared in the press, which was us providing assurance that the current provider of medical services would remain in place. Obviously, it would be for the current provider, College Health, to re-tender through normal protocols. No one can guarantee that someone will win a tender. However, on behalf of the council, I can say I think College Health are an extremely strong outfit, and I would be very keen to support them as they go forward. And obviously, finally, to thank my officers. It was a difficult situation when Roger Harris had to stand in front of me when several hundred people were demanding we take action. I don't know if Roger was either trying to protect me or trying to prevent me from saying something that perhaps would have been unwise, because he knows I'm tempted to...
Always the latter.
I'm tempted to outburst at times. But Roger did have worked away very hard, as has Mandy Anson on the CCG, the EPG, Health Watch, and so on. So thank you, and hopefully when we come to an update there will be more definitive and final news.
Thank you, Councillor Howland. I'm going to move again, whereas before on the budget, I've deliberately listed those. I think they're really quite important, and again, this one equally is important, that Cabinet approves purchase of freehold interest in the East Tilbury Medical Centre at 85 Coronation Avenue, East Tilbury, on the terms and conditions outlined in the confidential report, which I can't and the final terms and conditions being delegated for agreement by the Corporate Director of Environment and Place and Section 151 Officer in consultation with the relevant portfolio holder. Is that agreed? The Director of Law and Governance be authorised to complete any legal documentation to give effect thereto. Make sure we can do it as fast as possible, and that the property be leased to an appropriate primary care provider on the terms to be agreed, and that's what James has just covered in his last piece. Is that agreed? Excellent. In that case, I call the meeting to a close at 7:47.